This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
I guess it's the bliss. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Blissed? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. Broadcasting live from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains, Studio A. Your classroom reaches 50 states and worldwide on the internet via satellite. And wherever you are, you can listen on your smartphone. Yep, there's a free smartphone application. You can download it at GCNlive.com, Genesis Communications Network, GCNlive.com. It's a link to all of your instructors on the website, USAPrepares.com, USAPREPARES.com. So if you'd like to revisit something that you heard on this broadcast, share this broadcast with friends and family, you may. Absolutely free. Converging threats are confronted daily by your instructors. I'm Vincent Finelli. Tom is producing the broadcast in Minnesota. Meet up Monday at Ziggy's, 5:30, Springfield, Missouri. We're going to learn about quail, raising quail, quail eggs, quail meat for food. That's survival food, and lowering your food costs. Quail and rabbits just may be your best alternative. Today, water. We're going to learn about water. Casey Mustin of Hewitt Messenger, a Nixa, Missouri company, is with us. Casey specializes in water, from drilling the wells to designing and installing the pumping and storage systems. Add to that the filtration and treatment, and there you have it, A to Z, water. Class, you know that 3/4 of the Earth's surface is covered with water. Most of that is salt water. We're going to talk about what's in water, how to treat it. And you know, many people who come to the expo and to the meetups are thinking about rainwater collection systems. What I'm talking about is a roof that leads to a gutter, that leads to a leader, that leads to a 55-gallon drum or larger. Water collection. Do you want to collect rain from your roof? Do you really want to do that? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the risks. We're going to talk about water filtration. We're going to talk about water for survival and everyday use. Welcome, Casey Mustin.
Thank you, Vince.
Hey, Casey, you know, what about that? What about water, collecting it from the roof? Seriously, so many people think that we're going to have a serious water shortage in our lifetimes. Not of water necessarily, but of potable drinking water.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's going to be, there's lots of water, but it's water that's going to be safe to consume. You know, I do have a rain barrel on my home, but I don't use it for the garden. I use it for, you know, the other plants outside, and that's it. Now, there are many methods of filtration. You can collect rainwater and use it for a numerous array of uses, but I would absolutely suggest considering some kind of filtration, whether you've got you know, a sand filter or a multi-barrier where you've got sand and carbon to filter that water, and that's if you're going to use it for the garden. And to drink it, man, you better pressurize it and put it through some extreme filtration. Ultrafiltration like reverse osmosis or distillation before you even consider drinking it.
Casey, you mentioned a sand filter. Now, years ago, the technology was available even as far back as the early 1960s, where sand-based filters were used to filter swimming pool water. and all it really was sand that you pump the water through a sand bed, and the large particles were trapped by the sand, and then you'd backflush the water in the reverse direction, and all of those particles and chunks of debris would be removed and lifted back out of the sand, and you could reuse that sand. Is that the kind of filtration you're talking about, just plain old sand?
Well, it's a very, very similar. Like right now, for example, in the Amazon, they've got, third world country conditions, and that's kind of like what we're looking at in the worst case scenario. We're in that condition. So in Amazon, they pull the water straight out of the river. And you can imagine all the living parasites and organisms that are just freely moving around in this water. And basically, they don't have the high-tech filtration equipment that we have, but they have large barrels, and what they'll do is they'll build a biosand filter. And basically, they fill up this large container with clean sand, and as they start to use this filter, it improves over time. The more they use it, the cleaner the water becomes because it builds these layers of biofilm. And this biofilm actually acts as a screen or a filter for biological material. And as it passes through this film and all this sand, it is greatly, greatly clarified, and you reduce a lot of those natural organisms moving around in the water and free-floating sediments.
Okay, so how effective is that against? Is that effective against bacteria?
Well, not to an extreme case, but just like Montezuma's Revenge, the people that live in those areas, their systems are more adapt to those bacteria and natural living things in the water, so they don't have as much of a problem as, say, one of us that goes down to visit, and we get deathly ill.
Sure. Okay, so it will help if you're a native or if you're accustomed to it. But what about us, Casey? For what do we do? Let's assume that we're concerned about a water shortage. Let's assume that could happen because of a power grid down condition. Mm-hmm. So now those of us who have wells, we can't pump the water out of our wells unless we have a generator or some kind of emergency power system. Or let's say, and it also would impact the city now, wouldn't it? The city water.
Absolutely.
Because they need electricity to pump the water. So those who live in the city, if you think that you just turn on that water faucet, if there's a grid down situation, at some point the water's going to stop. So what do we do, Casey?
Well, depend on yourself. Don't depend on some large infrastructure to try to take care of you. Mm-hmm. Number one would be to have a good quality well, some kind of source that you can draw your water from. Typically, well water, depending on the time of the year, is going to be around 50 degrees. Those wells typically don't like to harbor bacteria. But having a good plan of what you're going to do when the power does go out, whether you've got some holding tanks, whether you've got a spring coming out of the hill that you can collect water from, and then possibly pressurize it and run it through a stage of filters. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. And not only is that situation different of where you can draw that water from, but the water itself is different. So you really have to be specific into your drinking water needs as well as the water that you are able to collect, because it's all going to be different.
Casey, for those of us who have farms, we have wells. Mm-hmm. Some of us have multiple wells. Some of us have ponds. So let's say that there's a person, in the city. Do we store water? Do we take that water that comes from the tap and store it for the short term so that we can get to a more permanent solution later on? Is that what we do?
Yeah, I think that is a pivotal part of it is being able to sustain yourself for X amount of time until you can come up with something better. Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what I've done, Casey. There's in the Ozarks, you can buy a 330-gallon plastic tote. And what they're used for initially, it's like frosting for cakes or oils for making cookies. And these great big, roughly 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 foot, cubes. Mm-hmm. And they have a metal cage around them, and you can actually stack one on top of the other. So I have 2 of those. So I have 2 times 330 gallons. I paid about $100 a piece for them, and I'm going to put them in our garage. Actually, they're in our garage right now, and I'm going to plumb them so I can fill them with water. They have a valve at the bottom, and I can shut it off. So I'll have 2 times roughly 300 gallons of water for whenever I need it. And now that won't last very long because we've got, over 100 head of cows, mm-hmm. and they drink 30 gallons a day each. So that amount of water that I have is really nothing compared to what I need. But for us, it would last quite a while. So for $100, class, you can do something like that. You can get these used containers. What do you think about doing that, Casey?
It's absolutely a great idea. It's part of the being prepared is to have water on hand. If you can't get it out of a well, if the city's not able to provide it anymore, you've got something there to get you some extra time to get to a good water source where that you can be sustainable. Taking care of the animals, that's another big part of it. If you've got agriculture, you've got animals that are going to be dependent on food, and that's going to feed you too. So you got to be able to take care of them. The only thing you could do any better besides that, just storing the water, is to elevate the water so that you can create some natural pressure from grade.
Mm-hmm. That is the plan. And where I have these tanks is elevated from the basement. And what I'm going to do is just plumb it right into our existing water system, so that if I go into the basement, I just I open the valve from these tanks. I shut off the valve from the well, and now I have this column of water, which would be about 10 feet tall, so I'd raise it up so it's 10 feet, and I'd have low pressure out of the faucet in the basement with the plumbing that already exists. Class, you can do the same thing. You really can. $100 for the tanks each, and let's say $100 for some plumbing. Do-it-yourself project, you can probably get it done in a weekend. Casey Mustin, Hewitt Messenger. We'll be right back. With us, and he's with Hewitt Messenger Well Drilling. And I'm going to give you a telephone number. If you decide that you'd like to call him, talk to him after the broadcast, let me give you that number. It's area code 417-725-8816. 417-725-8816. Hewitt Messenger is in Nixa, Missouri. Casey, we know that from previous classes with you that water is a universal solvent. We wash our hands with it. We take a shower with it. It removes the grime off us. We can make that process a little easier by using soap with the water, but it is a universal solvent, and it dissolves pretty much everything that it comes in contact with. Now, because of that, water as a universal solvent dissolves whatever it comes in contact with in the ground when we pull it out of the ground. It dissolves what it comes in contact with as it runs down the curbs and the sides of streets. It picks up the oil from the crankcase drippings on the roads, and that ultimately ends up into our drinking water supply. So let's talk about So let's talk about water filtration. We started out with a very simple gravity-fed sand filtration system. We added some carbon, which is charred wood, if you will. And can we make our own filter, a very simple filter?
Absolutely.
Can you take us through that? And then let's go on from a very simple filter, make it a little more complex, one that we can build at home, do-it-yourself project, and then let's get into the other more sophisticated, commercially available systems for our homes and businesses.
So your basic off-the-grid filter system would be easiest to construct out of 5-gallon buckets or 50-gallon buckets. If you had optimal would be stainless steel because there's such a concern with BPAs. But these buckets will let you contain, a different aggregate, and an aggregate meaning sand, gravel, carbon. You can actually produce your own activated carbon, and just it's a multi-layer or multi-barrier filtration. And you can use gravity to feed water from your first stage, would be the roughest aggregate, maybe a pea gravel, and then as it filters through that pea gravel, you would have a hole in the bottom of the bucket going into the next bucket, and that might have sand in it. And then after it filters through all that sand, it could go into the next bucket, which would have carbon. And by the time it's done with all of that filtration, you're going to have a much better quality water to consume. And that's your worst case scenario. That's off grid. You're not able to pressurize. You're just using gravity to basically do what nature does.
Okay. So now if we had, let's say we were concerned about biological contaminants, could we take a few drops of chlorine, put that chlorine in the water that we are going to then pour into our first level of filtration, the gravel. So let it set with chlorine, non-scented, non-lemon scent, just plain old chlorine bleach, a few drops in that 5-gallon bucket. Let it sit covered for, 10 minutes, and then pour it through the gravel, and then from the gravel let it drip into the sand filtration, and ultimately through the carbon that we've built.
Yeah, that's a great process. You do need a little bit of contact time, so you would want to let that water set in that chlorine for a little while. I'd say I'd let it at least sit in there for 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour at minimum. Okay. Then you can pour it into that multi-barrier. And the beauty of it, if you actually have carbon on the back side of it, carbon's going to strip the chlorine out after it's already sterilized.
There you go. Now, do you have some thoughts on how to make that carbon?
Biocarbon, you can produce it by a gasifier. And basically a gasifier, you create a fire, and then you force oxygen out of this fire, which keeps your wood from turning into ash.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So can we do that by putting, let's say, some kind of a non-galvanized bucket in a flame?
Yes.
Okay. So basically you're trying to put some wood in a bucket, in a flame, and the heat will drive, will leave you with carbon. And you can then crush that and put that into your water filtration system. Casey Mustin's with us, Hewitt Messenger. We're going to be right back. Now we're going to talk about more sophisticated water filtration. Mustin's with us, and we're talking about water. We talked about the basic water filtration system, how to build one during the first two segments. And now we're talking about a more sophisticated system. Casey, if we're concerned about the radiation coming from Fukushima in the air, landing on our ground right here in the United States, in North America, what can we do about that if we are concerned? By the way, are you concerned about this, or is it just me and a few of the others?
Well, if it's in the air, it's in our water, it's in our food, it's everywhere. To filter radiation from water is extremely difficult. There are some new products on the market right now. Fukushima inspired a new cartridge, which is a standard 10-inch cartridge that can be used in any whole house filter housing. And it has been tested and proven to be able to remove radioactive material from the water. This filter is called TRAP, T-R-A-P, radiation filter. It's a countertop model. I believe that they were saying it's good for about 150 gallons, which doesn't sound like a lot of water, but once you're drinking, 8 ounces or so, per serving, it can last you. The longest, the most longevity that I can see is basically being able to remove the dust that's connected to this radiation. And basically what we're talking about is rainfall. So the rain is picking up the dust and all this debris floating in the air, and the radiation is actually attached to this dust. So if we can remove the dust, we can remove these small particles from the water, we can greatly reduce any kind of negative effect it would have on us. And that's on a whole house level where you can shower, you can brush your teeth, you can do all these things, and carbon has been proven to be very effective in that.
So, Casey, if we have a carbon block type filter, are we more secure in, or more? Do we have a greater degree of safety in removing those radioactive isotopes and elements and compounds from our water? Is that what you're saying?
As long as it's activated carbon.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
so,
a granular activated carbon would be even a bigger improvement.
Okay. So, class, we can make these. We can make these ourselves. And, Casey, you said that that the Trap 10-inch standard size cartridge for the whole house will remove up to the radiation up to 150 gallons.
Yep.
So let me see if I've got this right. That's the same size filter that goes in the whole house housings. And can we plumb that, Casey, so that we have one of those that has, let's say we want to put it under our kitchen sink, and we can run a separate water spigot, if you will, for drinking water only? Can we do that?
Absolutely. I do it often with reverse osmosis.
Oh, okay. So what are we talking about? If someone were to buy the items, him or herself, to do this, what would they need, and what would it roughly cost to make this little system as an add-on to their kitchen sink? So we're talking about a separate faucet that you can fill a glass or a pot of water if you want to boil some pasta or make some soup or cook some vegetables. And I guess that's what we'd want to use this for, right? And drinking.
Yep. I found this Trap radiation filter actually as a countertop model, okay, which has the housing and the faucet directly on top of the countertop. So it's portable. You can take it with you. If you wanted to hard plumb it in, basically you're just going to add a small little $50 faucet, drill a hole in the countertop or the sink area, and you would run a single water line off of the cold water tap so that you've got filtered cold water for your cooking and drinking. Okay.
Well, are we talking about less than $100?
Yeah, the countertop model was less than $100 I saw online. To have a plumber come in and do the work for you, you might be looking at another $100 and $150 for labor and parts, but very minimal.
There you go. Okay, T-R-A-P, Trap. Okay, so Casey, what do we do for more sophisticated commercial filtration of our water? And let me tell you where I'm going with this. I have a well, and I believed yesterday that the water was fine. But I don't know about today. I believe that the water from the municipal water supplies was probably okay yesterday. You know, it has fluorine or fluoride, and it has chlorine, and it has all kinds of other toxins in the water. But, you know, they would say it's generally acceptable. Okay, but it could be worse today. We're looking at a possible conflict with Syria. There may be some pollutants added to our municipal water supplies that we don't know about. Well, how do we make sure that at our homes we are protected?
We break it down into two categories, point of entry and point of use. Okay. Point of entry means we can filter the entire house. And there's many, many, many different options and cartridges and machines that will filter, purify, and treat a huge array of problems. And point of use, of course, is kind of like going back to what we said with a single tap at the kitchen sink for just your drinking and cooking needs. But at point of entry, we have to be able to pressurize that. We have to be able to push that water through those filters to make those machines work. So we've got to have power or a way to pressurize. We can go into details on that, but I'm going to jump right into the filters. So whole house filtration, you can, first off, you want to know what your problem is. If you've got sand or sediment, you want to focus your first stage on treating the heavy particles. Because if you don't, you put a nice carbon block filter in there, and you try to run a bunch of clay or heavy sediments through it, well, it's going to foul that carbon filter up in no time. And that can be extremely expensive and not a good scenario. So you want to think about what's in the water and how you can stage those filters to remove the impurities that you're concerned with. So basic inline filters, they've got a huge array of micron ratings. Typically, I use a 5 micron, whether it be a sediment filter or a carbon filter. And, you know, in different situations, that micron rating might have to go up just to have better longevity. But those filters, they make carbon block filters, where it's an extruded piece of carbon. They make granular activated carbon filters, which is a loose granular material. Those do fantastic. We call them taste and odor filters because they absorb all kinds of organics and pollutants that make the water taste not like it should, not pure. From basic inline sediment filters and carbon filters, we start looking at mechanical filters. And these would be machines that can use air injection or an array of different medias to treat things like iron, or actually there's a media that will help take care of radiation that I was reading about. There's green sand, there's Phylox, there's Zeoprep, there's all these different things that are collected for water filtration, and they all have a very specific use and problems to fix. And at the very end of all of that, generally after you've got the minerals removed, the gases removed, if you've got sulfur or something like that in there, typically I'd like to use ultraviolet, which is going to kill bacteria continuously as the water moves through the system. And they take very little maintenance.
Hang on a second. Okay, thank you. Casey, how does that work when you use ultraviolet light?
Well, basically, we're able to sterilize bacteria. So we're rendering it harmless to the human body. It's still there. It's just not alive where it can hurt us anymore. We filter down to 5 microns before we do any kind of ultraviolet, because the bacteria can actually hold on to this little particle and hide behind it.
Interesting. Okay, so this is that bluish, whitish light that we see sometimes in restaurants, and we see sometimes behind the deli counters, and we see them at Sam's Club, right where they serve their pizza and drinks and so forth. And we just pass the water through that. So it's a commercially available device.
Oh yeah, it's used in wastewater treatment. It's used in heating and cooling. It's widely distributed now, and it's been proven to be highly effective in keeping your water safe to drink.
Okay. And what does one of those units cost, Casey?
They make several different models out there. I sell a unit that starts out about $750. Yearly maintenance is going to be changing a bulb, and those bulbs range in price from $50 to upwards of a couple $100. My bulbs cost $96.
And these bulbs last about a year. Is that what you're saying?
12 months is the recommended change time, and that's through the manufacturer. They say that those bulbs can potentially be effective and kill bacteria for a little bit longer, but when we're talking about bacteria and consuming, you don't want to risk it.
I agree. And when we come back, Casey, let's talk about some of the items that you should have. So, for example, how many people will have a filtration system installed and not get the maintenance replaceable items? How many will do that? And so what do you recommend that we start with, and what do you recommend we keep? We'll be right back. Casey Mustin's with us. Casey, let me give out your contact information. You can go to area code 417-725-8816, 417-725-8816, and that's Hewitt Messenger. And there's someone there right now. The office staff is ready to connect you. If you'd like to call and get some information after the broadcast, which will be at the top of the hour, you can call Casey. Casey, a couple of quick questions in the few remaining minutes that we have. When someone buys a water filtration system, do you recommend, as I do, that they should have spares, replacement components, filters, and so forth?
Absolutely.
And what would they be?
Absolutely. If you're using a whole house filter, to have some spare cartridges set aside. A good idea to have an extra O-ring or two. If you can't get the thing to seal, it's hard to get water back on.
You're right.
Good idea to keep a little bit of chlorine around. If you see a little bit of slime build up inside those cartridges, or I like to look in the back of toilet tanks a lot because they never get cleaned. If you see some slimy matter starting to grow there, it's a good idea to sterilize the system. So it's good to have a little bit of chlorine around. Really just basic maintenance. Be aware of what your water is pumping up and how frequently you need to change those filters, and it'll really save you a lot of headache in the long run.
Casey, let me see if I've got this right. You're talking about chlorine. So if you have a whole house filter, and here's what I've done in the past, and please criticize me if you think that this is crazy. I have poured chlorine into the whole house filter, into the whole canister, and then I have opened the faucets slowly all over the house and let that chlorinated water mixture sit in the pipes for a few hours, and then I thoroughly rinse the pipes. That's something that I've done for a very, very long time, probably since the 1960s. Do you recommend that, assuming that you can rinse the pipes thoroughly and get the chlorine out of the pipes?
Absolutely. It's not a bad thing at all. We regularly sterilize wells. I recommend folks test their water regularly, whether it's once a year, once every 6 months, especially if you've had a problem before. But we sterilize wells. We'll shock that well, and we'll do that exact same process. We'll run that water through all the plumbing in the home until you can smell the chlorine coming out of the tap, hot water and cold water, indoor and outdoor. So you're sterilizing the entire system, because that bacteria, it will work its way back in if you miss a line. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but I think it's a great process. And just like you said, I don't like chlorine unless there is a problem. So if you see some sliminess, or you're starting to pick up a little bit of odor through the water, or it's just been a while, it's a good process.
Casey, I've looked whenever I wanted to buy a home, and I've bought many over my lifetime. The first thing I do when I go inside the house, or one of the first things, is I lift up that toilet tank lid and I look at the water. And a lot of times it tells me when the house was built, because the toilet is usually, added at the same time that the house is built. And there's the date stamp on them. So you can generally get a feel for at least how old the toilet is. The other thing is I look at the condition of the water in there. And you're right, I have seen slimy black, and I'm thinking, man, oh man, the last thing I want to do is have a glass of water out of these pipes, without sterilizing them. And it kind of tells me the condition of the well also, or the community water supply. So I'm with you there. And I have also seen toilet tanks that are absolutely pristine. But you can smell the chlorine in the water.
Oh, yeah.
In those pristine tanks. So, Casey, we need to have some spare filters, some O-rings for our whole house water filter. It's absolutely, in my opinion, crazy not to have at least a 5-micron whole house water filter, which is what you've recommended. And that's what you have at your home, correct?
That's right.
There you go. Casey Mustin, Hewitt Messenger. Let me give you the number, 417-725-8816. 417-725-8816. Casey drills the wells. He puts the holes in the ground, puts the well pumps in the holes, adds the pipes, runs the lines to the house, connects and designs the systems for water treatment, water filtration from the beginning to the end. Casey knows how to do it. He has done it. He's an expert. He's a USAPrepares.com instructor. Casey, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Vince. I'd love to talk next time about solar pumps.
Solar pumps. Let's do it. Next time, solar pumps. You're on.
Wonderful.
Class coming up, Michael Evans, Syria. What's going on? We'll be right back.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. This is hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. Joining us this hour, Michael Evans. Michael Evans is a broadcaster in Missouri. He's a USAPrepares.com instructor. And he's passionate about what's happening and telling you and teaching you about what's happening in the media, in the world, events that are threatening to us. Welcome, Michael Evans.
Good morning. How are you?
I am
I
well.
just got on 2 hours. I'm just fired up, brother.
Mike, I want to just share one of the things that we're doing. We are trying to expose some of the corruption, some of the illegalities, some of the threats against us. Last night I got an email from a young man. His name is Jeffrey Deskovic. This man was tried and convicted of a crime he did not commit. And
I know that story.
Yeah, well, I thought I'd push that button, Michael. And this
I've
guy.
heard that story before.
This is just one of many, right? This guy spent 16 years in a maximum security prison for a crime he did not commit. And I just got an email from him, and he's going to be on the air with us. We're going to talk about what that's like. And here's what really frosts me. Not only were there deceptions from the people whom we entrust to do the right thing in the criminal justice system. They failed us. But those boneheads won't even make an apology for the 16 years that they stole from this man.
Oh, yeah.
You know about that?
Tell me about it.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Someday.
You know, the truth is, and there was just an article out the other day, I did a show on it actually, about how 40,000 people had their evidence tampered with by a lab up in Connecticut. And they have to give all 40,000 of these people a new trial. 40,000 by one corrupt technician or laboratory rat. And, I mean, this is so rampant in our society. The other day, they found another problem with DNA sampling, and literally thousands of men have spent their entire lives on death row over hair sampling on DNA, and nobody cares.
It's a DNA sampling problem with this man's conviction. And they found the guy. 16 years later, they found him.
Right.
Oops. So, and they didn't even, Michael, they didn't even say they were sorry. I'll tell you
Couldn't
what.
even care less.
I think there ought to be absolutely extreme penalties meted out to the people who are involved in the corruption, from every single person involved in the corruption of these trials. They need to get at least 2 times whatever happened to the person that got convicted wrongly. Seriously, I'm talking about the cops.
The truth of the matter is, these are prosecutors, so they have judicial and prosecutorial immunity.
Let's fix that.
And the judges do too. And they're
Let's
all
fix
in on
that.
it. The
Let's
judges
fix
know
it.
the prosecutor is notching his pistol grip, and the judge is just sitting there playing along with it. And they don't really care who's guilty or innocent. They just want that thing off, that docket off their desk.
Michael, this wasn't something that we planned to talk about, but let's continue for just a few more minutes. There are judges who have taken payoffs to send young men to prison because they got a kickback per head that they sent to private prisons for profit.
Absolutely.
We're talking about, hey, $1,000 a head. Let's send 10 of these young guys to prison. Who cares about them? Who cares what we're sentencing them for? Let's get that $1,000, and we can take the wife out to a nice dinner, on vacation, buy a new car, live a luxurious lifestyle on the backs of the little people who were convicted of crimes they did not commit.
Yep, and that is so criminal that frankly there's not enough punishment, because now you're talking about an action, a willful action by an individual who knows the difference and is in a position of elevated authority and elevated position where he or she could make a difference and correct the error, knowing that it's there. And they have used that for their own personal gain. And that is far worse than somebody who robs a bank, who's desperate for money, or somebody who, commits a crime or gets a DUI or something. I mean, when you're talking about somebody who they are abusive of the authority and the power which they have been entrusted with by the public, and that makes it a crime of unimaginable intent and content.
And this is why there is less and less and less trust of those whom we have elected to represent our interests, because they have lied and cheated and pilfered their way to prosperity on our backs. We've had it with them. We've absolutely had it with these cretins. Michael,
well,
on this,
the problem is that until the legislative is willing to step in and say that kind of activity, and honestly, it even goes beyond the legislative, unless they're willing to step up and remove judicial immunity. I'll tell you one of the best things that the average listener can do, because that's one question that you and I get a lot, right? Well, you're telling me about these problems. What do I do to fix it? I'm going to tell you what you can do. Number one, as a listener, never, ever avoid jury duty again. If you are called up to be on a grand jury or a jury, you go, because the life you save may be your own. And I'm not kidding. In other words, people say, oh, I got jury duty. What do I got to do to get out of it? Don't get out of it. Go on purpose. Actively seek to be on juries. It only takes one person out of a jury to say, I'm not convicting that guy. And you can do it. But you have to be on the jury in order to be the lifesaver. But
that's absolutely right.
You got to be on the jury.
Michael, right? I've been called to jury duty, and every time that I've been called, I was delighted to be called. I was delighted to be there. And every time I get thrown off the jury, every time they throw me off, they will not let me sit on the jury.
Well, and let me tell you, the reason, why do you think they won't let felons sit on a jury? They don't let felons sit on a jury because they say, one, these guys have inside scoop and knowledge on the system, and we don't dare let them get up. Two, as a payback against the system, they may well just let everybody go, irrespective of guilt. And three, they know that felons, to a certain extent, are far more likely to recognize it when they are railroading somebody than when they're not. And so felons are all barred from sitting on a jury. Period. It's not optional.
Well, I remember being one of 13 in the jury room while the judge and the defense and the prosecution were discussing who would be removed. And I remember sitting next to this drunk guy. I mean, this is like 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning. This guy was drunk as a skunk. He was in there. Next to him was another guy who said, man, I don't care which way this goes. I just want to be out of here. He didn't care, guilty, not guilty. He didn't even want to listen. He wasn't interested in the truth. And when they and when we got called back into the courtroom after sitting in that back room while they discussed who was going to be thrown out, Mr. Finelli, thank you very much for being here today. You're dismissed. First guy to get thrown out.
Yep.
It's like clockwork. And here's what happened, Michael. After I got thrown out and the jury was selected, the whole pool of potential jurors, they were all in the courtroom. And by the way, this was, if you ever saw the movie Summersby, this is the actual courthouse that the movie Summersby with Richard Gere and Jodie Foster acted in. Okay, that is the courthouse that I was in. It's in Charlotte Courthouse, Virginia. The courthouse at Charlotte Courthouse, Virginia. Anyway, that's the court. I got thrown out, and as I was on the courthouse steps leaving, people came up to me, shook my hand, said, "Man, that was great. That's amazing how you got thrown off jury duty. Man, that was really cool what you did."
How'd you do that, they ask?
They wanted to know how I got myself removed from jury duty, and I said, "What? Are you kidding me? I wanted to be on jury duty."
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give your listeners a tip. So get your pens and paper ready, because I know you got them if you listen to Vince. There's a website where you can go that's called the Fully Informed Jury Association. It's called FIJA, F-I-J-A, Foxtrot, Igloo, Joliet, Alpha. And this website teaches you how to be a juror. And not only does it teach you how to be a juror, it teaches you your rights and your responsibilities as a juror and as a member of this society. Because remember now, this is supposed to be a jury of what? Your peers, right? And so it's critically important that you participate in jury duty, because I'm telling you, the life you save may be your own.
And you are not kidding. Michael Evans, Vin Finelli, USAPrepares.com. We're going to take back America. We're taking back America. We're taking back America. We'll be right back. Michael Evans is with us. Michael is absolutely passionate about getting the news out. And Michael's in Missouri, down the road a couple hours from where I am, broadcaster. Michael, you are very concerned about the world events. You're concerned about Syria. Let's talk about Syria.
Yeah, it's ugly. You know, we're kind of being waylaid into this position of being a mercenary for foreign governments. And, you know, my concerns with this are deep and strong. And the scope of this thing is going to, I believe, will get out of hand if we actually go over there. And it's not just one organization or another. I mean, here we are stepping in to fight on the side, in theory, of Al-Qaeda, which is our sworn enemy, literally a country and a half away. And in addition to that, the Arabs and OPEC are offering to pay if we'll simply oust and do a regime change on Assad. the Arabs, and Kerry mentioned it in an open Senate hearing, John Kerry, Secretary of State. He said, well, the Arabs have offered to pay. You got to be kidding me. So what you're saying is we should go to war on behalf of the Arabs who don't like Assad because he is a threat to their monarchy, and they don't like Iran, who they're hoping will come in on the battle, and then we get to take Assad and Iran out. I mean, it's unbelievable. We shouldn't even be, George Washington said it best. We should be friends with all, allies with none, and avoid foreign entanglement. And he said it for a very clear, specific reason. This was in his speech as he left the presidency. And the reason for it was because when you get involved in these exterior entanglements, you lose focus on your primary function and goal, which is for us to be a nation where our government is operating for one and one reason only. That is to protect our rights and to engender a scenario where commerce can continue and we can all grow and be, and improve our lives and our situations. But now we have a scenario where we literally have senators and congresspeople who are selling their vote to the defense industry when they don't even understand the true depths and implications of what they're promoting here. Because this, anytime we start going over there to start a battle, first of all, we have to look at who the players are. And, you wouldn't go start a fight with a guy as a bully if you saw his big brother standing right behind him, would you?
Right.
And that's who Putin is, right? Putin from Russia is standing right behind Syria and saying, you pick on my little brother, you're picking on me. And we're stupid enough to wade right in there and say, we don't care. It's absurd to me. And meanwhile, we're being egged on by a couple of other stupid friends called OPEC, Arabs, and Israel, for that matter. And, I'm not trying to trounce Israel here because I know people are very sensitive about that. But Israel would love nothing better than for us to go in there and wipe Syria down and then take out Iran as well. Those are the two primary threats to them: Hezbollah, Syria, Assad, and Iran. So here we are being pushed and pulled from all these different directions by all these people who don't have the courage or the strength or the fortitude to go do it themselves, but are more than happy to push us into the middle of the fight. I mean, it's absurd, and we're falling for it. It's beyond comprehension. I just did a show this morning. It's up on YouTube right now. You can go to youtube.com/America's Voice Now and see this show. I just put it up this morning. Out of the 17 senators or 18 senators who sit on the Senate Foreign Intelligence Committee, 10 of them voted for this. Want to know something? Those senators who voted for it averaged 83% more money from the industrial complex and the defense industry in bribes and lobbying and contributions to their campaign donations. So the ones who voted yes got 83% more money. And guess who was at the top of the heap? John the Traitor McCain, $180,000 last year. $180,000. Does anybody remember the story about a guy named Judas who sold out his best friend for 30 pieces of silver? Does anybody recall that story?
Michael Evans, you're saying it so well. When we come back, I'd like to ask you, is there a difference between payoffs, bribes, lobbying, and campaign contributions? Is there a difference? We'll be right back. Michael Evans is with us, and we're furious. Class, I don't believe Congress has a conscience. They consistently don't do the right thing. They sell us out at every turn. An example? Nuclear power generation. They're complicit with this. They have allowed it to happen. This is the most dangerous thing that has ever been done by humanity to humanity. Nuclear power generation. It's out of control. Just think about Fukushima. Japan has polluted the oceans of the entire planet with radioactivity. Who made that happen? General Electric. And I believe that Syria is a distraction from our plague of problems that corrupt politicians have created. The first one that comes to mind is the economic collapse that's looming on the horizon. Michael, your thoughts?
You asked me a question before the break about the difference between bribery and lobbying.
Oh, yeah. What I said was payoffs, bribes, lobbying, campaign contributions.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I want to take this to make an instructive moment, because the truth is that this is something that your listeners can get their hands around and fully understand and grasp very easily, because this is the perfect example of it. If you were to do what corporations do to Congress when you were pulled over by a police officer, you would be arrested and imprisoned. It would be a felony charge. And the way they get around it is by a little trick that they call verbicide. When I say verbicide, what that is it's a redefinition of a word. When we look at what's going on here in Syria, when we look at what happened in Vietnam, when we look at what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq, they call that an action. We call that a war. But you see, they redefine words to try to make them something that they do that doesn't have the same meaning that the general populace of the country means by that word. And then when they twist that word around, and if you try to draw the correlation between it, they define it actually in legislation. And so lobbying is not bribery. Neither is a campaign contribution. But obviously, everybody knows, and a 3-year-old knows that something that's given to you comes with a string. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that if somebody dumps $100,000 into your campaign contribution committee, he's going to come back to you with a request. No one is expecting those corporations not to act that way. And yet, the only people who are capable of stopping it are those same people in Congress who actually benefit from it. And that is a tragedy of enormous proportion. If our founders ever understood the concept of what's going on with re-election money, campaigns, lobbying, and so forth, they wouldn't be angry. They would be at war. And that's just on that issue alone. Forget all the rest of the tyranny. Forget all the rest of the betrayals. Forget all the rest of the treason. They'd be at war over that issue alone. Because when corporations were first developed back in the 17 and 1800s, they had to have a public benefit function where they weren't allowed to continue in perpetuity. They were created and they had a finite lifespan, and you had to reapply to keep that corporation alive, and you had to show that you had accomplished some kind of public benefit with it. Today, corporations are for one reason, profit, and they live in perpetuity. And they classify themselves as individuals, state that they have individual First Amendment rights and all the rest of these things, and yet they're not held accountable to the same level that you as an individual or I as an individual or a listener would be held. And that is a travesty. And they use redefinition of language and verbicide to betray us daily.
Michael, here's a really simple example of that. Military action. We're going to have a military action. Now,
or a police
that sounds
action.
so bad. Well, it includes rockets, bombs, bombers, naval cannons, warships, aircraft carriers, the Marines, the Army, machine guns.
People are dead. That's war.
Michael, show me one military action, just one, where guns are not involved and guns are not pointed at people. Just show me one. The military, I don't think the military can do anything other than destroy stuff.
Well, that is why our founders said that military could never be a standing army, and that law enforcement was something completely different because their goals are different. Law enforcement is there to keep the peace. That's why they were called peace officers until they renamed themselves law enforcement. Military, on the other hand, has only one function, that is seek and destroy. and they don't go in and try to settle disputes peacefully or by mediation. They settle disputes with weapons and death. And that's the difference between military and law enforcement, which is another reason why the militarization of our law enforcement domestically should be so concerning to people, because we're training our law enforcement to be paramilitary. And when you have paramilitary training, by necessity, you are inclined to use it. One, you want to use the training you've gained. Two, you want to use the equipment that's been funneled to you. And so that's why we have all these instances of them issuing, doing no-knock warrants, where, they're issuing you a warrant for a bench warrant, and they're kicking in your door and running in there, hood, with SWAT uniforms on and guns drawn. I mean, it's ridiculous. For a guy who failed to show up for a DUI, come on. It's absurd.
Michael,
so the reality is, what we've got is this military complex that is overflowing into our domestic environment. And you're absolutely correct. They are, and they've blurred the lines even further by utilizing the term police action. That's what they used in Vietnam, you remember?
Sure, it was a police action. It lasted for decades.
Yeah. We lost 52,000 soldiers in a police action. And that's what we lost.
That's just
how many they lost.
Well, that's just the killed. What about the wounded? What about the mentally altered who were never right after the bombing, the napalming, the Agent Orange?
Sure. We're just talking about straight up hardcore deaths then. We're not talking about the literally hundreds of thousands who have succumbed since then to Agent Orange and diseases that they obtained in the jungle and the PTSD and all the other, horrors of war that draw their victims down later. And the truth of the matter is, they're throwing these sob stories out at us on Syria to bring it more to a more current level. And they say, well, this is a tragedy of immense proportion. They killed 1,400 civilians. Well, hang on a second. Let's put this into perspective and get rid of the hyperbole. The truth of the matter is that Assad, who is a murderous tyrant, absolutely, has killed 150,000 in the last 2 years. And nobody gave a damn about them. Now suddenly he kills 1,400, and they've got the plausible deniability to use that for an excuse. But I got to ask the guy who's dead, does it matter whether you died from VX gas, or does it matter whether you died from a bullet in the head, or does it matter whether you died because an artillery shell blew up the apartment building you and your children were in? To them, it makes no difference. Dead is dead. And there's no more excuse to go over there because they used VX gas than there is because they went over there and used an artillery shell than there is to go over there because they used a rifle.
Michael, VX gas, sarin gas, these nerve agents. Now, I just heard the president talking about it's unacceptable that these countries are developing and using these weapons. Really? Where did they get these nerve agents?
From us. They got them from us. And
so it's unacceptable.
If they didn't get the technology or the materials from, if they didn't get the materials from us, they got the technology from us.
What I'm saying, Michael, is the United States of America, our Barack Obama is saying it's unacceptable, but the technology and the weapons come from us. It's unacceptable.
Right.
But it's ours. Who do we think we are? We're a plague. We are a plague.
I'm reading a book about the trip up of Lewis and Clark across the country. Mm-hmm. And there's an interesting passage in there that sums it up rather well. They learned how to they had a blacksmith with them who, in trade with the Indians because they wouldn't sell them firearms, instead pounded out hatchets for them. And they wanted to use, the Indians, of course, wanted to use them for war hatchets because they were tribe against tribe all the time, stealing each other's horses and women and what have you. And Lewis and Clark pounded out these hatchets for them. They melted down an old stove and made hatchets. And then forbade them to use them in war. And the Indians were sitting there thinking, well, you just made this and traded it to me. You knew what I wanted it for. And now you're telling me I can't use it. I don't understand. And we're in the same boat. We're the number one arms exporter in the world. And then we turn around and say to countries who buy the stuff, oh, and by the way, you can't use it. I mean, explain the logic of that to me.
Well, explain the logic of the militarization of the police. Michael, it's story after story after story at usaprepares.com. Guy's up on the roof of his apartment building. It's a relatively flat roof. Somebody says, oh, there's a man on the roof. They call 911. They stupidly call 911. Class, don't call 911. If you do, someone's going to jail or someone's going to be killed. It's as simple as that. So they call 911. The 7 cops show up. This guy decides, okay, he'll jump from the roof onto the landing. He jumps about 8 to 10 feet. The cops jump him, tase him, kill him right there. He already came down. No threat. They kill him.
Yeah.
And they drag him down these concrete steps, and his head's going thump, thump,
I saw
thump.
that. What a tragedy.
Yeah, and one of our instructors, SWAT team shows up at his house. 20 of them. Hold him at gunpoint. Him and the eight people in the farm at gunpoint for 10 hours. Last time, I'm going to tell you something that this really, really, really bothers me. There is a rash of preparedness expos that are being advertised all over the country. They're claiming an unbelievable number of exhibits. They're claiming an unbelievable number of classes. I just got several emails that there was one that was going to be in Arkansas, and it was going to be a big one. They pulled the plug on it yesterday. There was one in Denver that was going to be a real big one, claimed to be way bigger than we are, way bigger. They were going to have 15,000 people. They claimed it. They put it on the internet. They advertised it. They said they were affiliated with a lot of organizations that you know and trust. They weren't. They had 377 people show up in Denver. There are other expos, and I'm encouraging you to go to their websites before you attend them. Here's why. I am no fan of FEMA. I am no fan of FEMA nor CERT. Those are government organizations. There are preparedness expos that are allied with the Red Cross, FEMA, and CERT, and other government agencies. And they say, you have a right to preparedness information, and we're going to help you. And we're going to give you free tickets. Just email us. So you go to the website, and you create this email address. It is sold. Your email address is sold. How do I know? Because I was told by our instructors at USA Prepares who've been approached by these other expos that they are offering for sale those email lists for $100. Think about that. Is that something that you want known? Do you want FEMA? Do you want CERT? And do you want other organizations to know who you are? Think about that. There's nothing free. There is nothing free. So if they let you in for free, somebody's paying for it. Michael, I'm so frustrated because there's so much disinformation out there. America's Voice Now is your organization, americasvoicenow.org. Michael Evans, link on the website at USA Prepares. Michael, I just wanted to share. One of our instructors, just like us, Quinn Aker, Arlington, Texas, 20 SWAT team, thugs, showed up at his farm. There were 8 people at his farm, men, women, and children. They showed up. 50 other agents showed up and occupied neighbors' homes. They cut off roads. They cut off communications. And this farm, the farmers were held at gunpoint for 10 hours. Why? Marijuana. Drug enforcement. These guys held at gunpoint, these farmers. They couldn't find anything. They could find nothing. 20 armed SWAT thugs, plus, in full body armor with assault weapons, held men, women, and children for 10 hours at gunpoint, handcuffed them in their own home.
And I'll bet they didn't even apologize when they left.
No, and well, they found tomato plants.
Right.
That's all they found. They trashed the place. I'm furious.
You know why that's happening? Because the state and local law enforcement have been given access to helicopters, and they are using them to fly around and fly over farms, where they are doing aerial surveillance of farmers and farms looking for marijuana in commercial growing operations.
Yeah.
And marijuana and tomato plants look very, very similar, especially when you're up at 1,000 or 15 or 25 or 5,000 feet.
Oh, except for these round red things and green things that hang off them.
Well, I don't know whether they're catching them, at an early date or what, but the truth is, listen, the simple reality is this. Marijuana is the one drug in the United States that has been used to grow law enforcement at an exponential rate. And, it is really the drug that virtually has almost no after effect. I mean, nobody goes and robs old ladies to get more weed. I don't promote it because I don't smoke it, but, that's on you if you want to. I personally, I don't like it, but that doesn't mean it's my place to sit and tell somebody else they shouldn't. And,
Michael Evans, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being with us. Michael Evans, link on the website, americasvoicenow.org. I'm Vincent Finelli. Above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to